Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. All the characters in this story are over 18 years old. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the promise of a wonderful autumn was in the air. Half of the trees growing along the city park were colored red, orange, and yellow, while the other half still retained their greenery. My morning couldn't have gone better. It was my 30th birthday, and 3 of my colleagues surprised me with an offer to go out for lunch, and my supervisor told me to take the rest of the day off. I decided to take a walk after I left the restaurant, instead of returning to our empty apartment. That's why I found myself walking through the park, and why I was at the corner of Main and Pine when it caught my attention. There was a bouquet of flowers in a trash can at the edge of the park. It wasn't just a bunch. An almost tasteless arrangement of red roses, yellow irises, purple larkspur, and 4 flowers that I couldn't identify, and they were all in the trash. I crossed the street and went into a nice outdoor cafe. There were 2 empty tables facing the park. I sat down at the table closest to the street, ordered a Campari Negroni, and watched people walk past the trash can. Several people, passing by the bouquet, took a double picture, and some even stopped and returned to take a closer look at it. No one touched the flowers, although one lady took a picture of them on her mobile phone. I sipped my cocktail slowly, watching as the man in the business suit stopped, shook his head, then moved on. He was a handsome young man, maybe my age, a little overweight, maybe 175 centimeters tall. My mind began to wander. John Farnsworth couldn't help but be surprised at the streak of luck that had befallen him lately. 5 years after graduating from graduate school, he worked hard at the bank for 5 years. And today he was called to the president's office and informed that the board of directors had elected him vice president. He almost started laughing, thinking it was some kind of prank, but of course Mr. Jackson never joked about such things. It was real. Vice president, 3 months before his 29th birthday. It was supposed to be a record. And in fact, according to his administrative assistant, Ms. Barnes, who has worked at the bank since its founding in 1989, John left Mr. Jackson's office and made a decision. This day has come. He had been dating Michelle for 6 months now. For 5 of them, they slept together and exclusively with each other and exchanged the words, "I love you," shortly before they made love for the first time. John sometimes found it hard to believe that a beautiful, intelligent, and charming woman like Michelle was his girlfriend. Besides, she had such a wonderful influence on John. She never complained about the extra time John spent in the office. She was always ready to go and do something at any moment, and she encouraged him to be the best. Her support got him back to the gym. Over the past 6 months, John has lost 9 kilograms and looked his best since wrestling in high school. He planned to lose another 5 kilograms before buying some new suits. Because of his current wardrobe, John looked a little overweight. John called Michelle at the office and asked if she was free for lunch. "I have some great news, and I need to ask you a question. Aren't you going to give me a hint?" "No, just meet me at Sullivan's in the park." "Oh, a mystery. I'm loving it. And I love you, baby. See you at noon." At 11:30, John came out of his office. Miss Barnes couldn't help but smile as John walked past her desk, whistling a tune. It was one of his mother's favorite Beatles tunes, sung by Paul, Michelle. John briefly looked into the flower shop in the lobby on the ground floor. "I want a bouquet. Something special for a very special lady." With a bouquet in his hand, John floated down the street, still whistling the melody and letting his imagination run wild. What will next year bring? The next decade? The next 50 years? John's parents had recently celebrated their 35th anniversary and were still madly in love. John could easily imagine himself and Michelle in 35 years, sharing life, love, and children. Here she is. Michelle was already sitting at a table outside. As John approached the restaurant, Michelle waved at him. When she saw the huge bouquet of flowers, her smile grew even wider. John was the sweetest, most generous man or guy Michelle had ever dated. He always did both small and big things to make her feel loved. John walked over to the table and bent down to kiss her. Michelle reached for the bouquet. "For me?" John jerked his hand away. "Not yet," and he sat down in the chair opposite her. "A little later. First of all, I want to introduce you to the new vice president of First Bank." Michelle understood immediately. "Oh, John, This is fantastic. She squeezed his hand. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. Getting Sullivan's account put me in the first place. Mr. Jackson said the board wanted to let me know how much I was appreciated. Michelle smiled again. So, this is my main news. Now my question. The waiter chose that moment to appear at their table and asked John if he could get him something to drink. Michelle was already sipping a glass of white wine. Yes, please bring us a bottle of champagne. We're celebrating today. My boyfriend got great news today, Michelle said to the waiter before he turned away. We are celebrating not only my promotion. John picked up the flowers from the table and handed them to Michelle. We can choose a ring together later. Let this bouquet be a symbol of that. Michelle, will you marry me? The seconds dragged by in an incredibly uncomfortable vacuum of silence as John waited for Michelle's response, and Michelle looked at John, wondering which words would cause the least harm. Finally, not knowing how to put it better, she just told him the truth. John, I don't love you that much. That's all it took. In less than a minute, John's world was turned upside down, from the highest heights to the deepest depths. Perhaps he had misheard her. But, you told me that you love me. We've been sleeping together for the last 4 months. You told me how happy I make you. What am I missing here? It's all true, John, but I will never love you enough to become your wife. I would always feel that I settled down early and didn't wait long enough for the right man. We would have been unhappy and eventually divorced, I guarantee it. The waiter brought the champagne and was about to open it. Wait. John got up from the table. We've changed our mind. John pulled all the cash out of his wallet, $82, and handed it to the waiter. It's to pay for her drinks and your tips. I suppose the champagne can be returned, since it has not been opened. Sorry. The waiter accepted the cash and nodded. Thanks. Not knowing what else to say. Obviously, something went wrong. John took the flowers and turned to leave. The waiter wasn't the only one who didn't know what to say. John wondered if a simple goodbye was appropriate. He couldn't call her a fool. She had never promised him anything. He just assumed that she loved him as much as he loved her. John was already leaving the fenced-in hall when Michelle called after him. Can I keep the flowers for myself? He crossed the street and put the bouquet in the trash can, right on top of all the other garbage that people left there. Fast food bags, soda cans, even a damaged umbrella that someone threw away after the morning downpour. Michelle called John the next day. She tried to do her best to make peace with him. Couldn't they continue to be friends for their own benefit? Would he meet her for dinner one evening soon? John's response to each request was the same. I can't imagine that this will happen. Nothing will change. I will always want more from our relationship than what you want. It's better to end this now, before you end up leaving me for the guy you really want to marry. After that day, they did meet several times, but only for the purpose of exchanging things left in each other's apartments. The city is big enough for them to live their separate lives and never see each other again. One afternoon, John was sitting in a tavern when the husband of one of Michelle's girlfriends came in. John always liked this guy, and he offered to buy him a beer. They started talking, and eventually John had to ask. I guess I've always been afraid to ask her. Maybe you know. What did Michelle mean when she told me she would settle down if she accepted my offer? Michelle has become a victim of her preconceived ideas about Prince Charming. He paused before deciding to continue. John, you look like me. Neither of us is tall, dark-haired, or handsome. We have a solid 7/8 on a scale from 1 to 10. I'm lucky. My wife loves me the way I am. Find yourself a woman who doesn't pay attention to all this nonsense and loves you for the same reasons. There are many women like my Jennifer. I lost almost 9 kilograms while dating Michelle, but I will never be more than 175 centimeters tall. If it's any consolation, Michelle has told Jen several times how much she misses you. I told Jen all about your wonderful qualities. She just couldn't get rid of the image of the perfect couple that had formed in her head. It's her loss. 5 years later, John saw Michelle at an open-air concert. John's wife stood next to him as they waited for his wife's bag to go through the security system. She noticed that John was staring intently at the brunette. Do you know someone? His wife's voice seemed to shake him. Do you remember when I told you about how I once proposed and was rejected? Yes, why? Is that her? Yes. Pretty girl. Do you want to come over and say hello? No. I would feel like I was just rubbing it in. You're rubbing what in? I'm here with you. The fact that she said no, and I obviously gave up when I met you and married you. Now, most wives, hearing such a remark, would call it bullshit. But John's wife knew John well enough to understand that he was completely honest. He really thought he had married the most beautiful woman in the world. She hugged John, thinking how happy he would be when she broke the news to him later that evening at the hotel. John is going to be a dad. The waiter came over to ask if I wanted anything else to drink. The sun was still warm. My glass was empty, and I still had nowhere to go. Why not? I looked back across the street just in time to notice a very attractive lady who was doing what many others had done before her, looking at the bouquet and stopping before moving on. And again, my imagination ran wild. Alexis Walker, née North, has spent the last hour wondering if she should start smoking again or not. She only quit smoking because Matt insisted that he would not marry her until she gave up this dirty habit. So, to please Matt, she decided to quit smoking with a nicotine patch. It's a pity that Matt couldn't give up his bad habits. Matt was a flirt. It didn't seem like such a bad habit when they were dating in college. Each of their friends seemed lively and cheerful, and flirting was just part of it. But, like many other things, the transition from student life to family, adult life has brought changes. Fewer and fewer of their male friends were willing to let their wives be groped. The women began to defend themselves when a young woman pressed her husband to her lips. What hasn't changed is Matt. Alexis and Matt got married the second year after graduating from high school. They were one of the few couples whose relationship survived after graduating from college. The problem was that relationships and marriage would soon join the rest in the past tense. Alexis was sitting in a cafe, fighting the urge to smoke. It would be so delicious with this cup of coffee. Which is more harmful, a large pastry or a cigarette? The lawyer she hired this morning will prepare the documents for delivery to Matt in 2 days. Alexis was sitting on the patio, drinking decaf coffee, wondering if she could ask the guy at the next table for a cigarette, and watching the trees across the street shake water from the leaves after the morning rain. Alexis could put up with flirting, but not cheating. 2 years after their wedding, Alexis caught Matt for the first time. He used that little cheater from the other side of the yard. The little fool was walking around her apartment with these transparent curtains as the only covering on the windows. The light was on in the room, and her silhouette played on the curtains. Sometimes, in daylight, she didn't even bother to draw the curtains as she casually strolled around her apartment. 3 months after Dura moved into the complex, she made sure that Alexis knew she was making love to Matt. Matt was too stupid to realize that this fool had set him up. When Alexis confronted Matt face to face, he apologized to all the devils. He made every promise known to man that it would never happen again, and begged Alexis to forgive him. Bouquets of flowers were brought to her apartment and office every week, until Alexis finally gave up. But first, get tested for diseases. Matt passed the test and came back clean. Alexis let Matt back into their bed. Alexis knew the fool's game. Matt wasn't an outstanding stud in the bedroom. He couldn't be anything other than medium-sized, and his talents didn't exceed his size. No, this fool just needed to prove her superiority by sleeping with any husband she could, and then accusing her wife of infidelity. Contrary to Alexis' common sense, she forgave him. She loved the bastard, but she made it clear as day that any further transgressions were unforgivable. She even forced him to sign a prenuptial agreement. Matt knew he had dodged a bullet. It all started with the blonde moving across the yard and starting her exhibitions, driving him crazy. And here Matt was being dishonest with himself again. Maybe he couldn't help himself. He was dishonest with everyone. His fall from grace did not begin with this blonde. Almost every woman he met gave Matt some reason to lust. It's just that the blonde was more accessible than the others. The shadows on the transparent curtains first caught his attention a week after she moved in. Matt almost said something out loud to Alexis as he sat on their back porch. But he kept his mouth shut, and the next day he was in the store buying the best binoculars. He began to spend more time on the veranda, watching and waiting. A light would come on in the blonde's window, and if he got away with it, for example, if Alexis was busy in the office, he would run inside and watch from one of the darkened rooms. He was watching her through binoculars. Like a trout caught on a barbed hook, Matt was dead. Despite her best efforts, it took the blonde 3 attempts for Alexis to catch her with her husband. The blonde almost gave up after the second session in her bedroom. Damn, how the hell did this woman put up with it? The first time was bad enough. Why did she hate Alexis? From the moment she first saw her, she hated her. Alexis was blessed with a slim body and long, toned legs, not to mention Alexis's excellent diet and jogging 30 to 40 kilometers a week plus all those laps in the pool. Alexis had so many friends, the result of Alexis' hard work to overcome her shyness and tendency to be an introvert. And most of all about how Matt just kept talking about how lucky he was to marry her. In their third session, she made sure to use Matt in his own bed. That's how they were caught. What a dumb fool. The worst part is that when Alexis discovered that Matt was cheating on her, Alexis eventually forgave the cheater and accepted him back, which Alexis did. Not that it was easy. It took Matt 2 weeks to get back to the apartment, and more than a month before they shared a bed again. For the next year, Matt did everything he could to convince Alexis that his cheating days were over. Alexis carefully opened her heart to Matt, forgiving him and doing everything possible to forget his betrayal. Alexis shouldn't have been surprised when, a little over a year later, she found out that he was cheating again. The surprise was more from how she found out. Matt was playing golf when the doorbell rang. After opening the door, she looked at the young girl standing in front of her. "Are you Alexis?" "Yes." Alexis was waiting for the girl to ask if she wanted to buy cookies for Girl Scouts or something. But why would this young girl know her name? "Can I talk to you? Please?" "Go on. It's kind of personal. May I come in?" Alexis looked behind the girl. She had heard about fraud when some thug comes after a girl. She didn't see anyone and unlocked the door. She blocked the door as soon as the girl crossed the threshold. "How can I help you?" The girl took a deep breath. "You can let Matthew go. Give him a divorce." Alexis almost went into shock and barely spoke. "Excuse me? Why don't you let Matthew go? If you loved him as much as you should, you would want him to be happy and let him go." "I will make him happy." If Alexis had watched this scene on some cheesy romantic series, it might have seemed crazy and funny, but this was her life. Damn it, not some TV show. A cauldron of hot lava was bubbling inside Alexis, but she needed answers, and she kept her cool. Despite this, Alexis couldn't resist asking, "How old are you?" The girl seemed to be asked a question, but answered, "I'll be 19 next month." Alexis didn't say it out loud, but she thought, 18. It's a pity. A year younger, and I could put his ass in jail. Alexis needed to keep the conversation going, and she turned on her phone's voice recorder. She almost asked if the girl wanted a glass of wine, but remembered that she was too young to drink. "Can I get you a Coke?" Lacey, that was her name, thought that everything was going pretty well. She expected to see a hysterical vixen, judging by the way Matt described her. Instead, she offers Coca-Cola. Alexis returned to the room with a Coke for Lacey and a glass of wine for herself. 20 minutes later, Alexis's patience snapped. Lacey left, and on Alexis's phone there were messages who, Lacey Brown, where they met, Lacey works at Tremors, a local Hooters fake. How long has this been going on? 2 months, and what? Alexis could have done without hearing how it was wonderful when Lacey and Matt made love. But now I've recorded it all on a dictaphone. By the time she left, Lacey had received a promise from Alexis that Matt would be free soon. Alexis pulled herself together, packed her bag, and drove to her sister Haley's house. As soon as she walked through the door, Alexis fainted and sobbed for the next hour while her sister hugged her. Haley's heart sank as Alexis's shoulders shook uncontrollably, telling her about Matt's misdeeds. Haley had never known about the first woman and wished Matt would walk through the door. More than anything, she would like to kick his ass for what he did to her little sister. It was Sunday. My sister called a friend who had recently divorced. By Monday morning, Alexis had an appointment with her lawyer for Wednesday. Now, after their meeting with the lawyer, she was optimistic, considering that everything would happen after the divorce, and Matt would be handed the documents on Friday. Alexis finished her cup of coffee and was ready to go home. It was time to pack a few more things from home when she looked up and saw Matt standing with a large bouquet of flowers. "Come home, Alexis." "I'm sorry, so sorry." Alexis left the cafe and crossed the street. Matt followed her. "What can I do to make amends?" Alexis stopped and reached for the bouquet. Matt was stunned, thinking to himself, "Can it really be that simple? Maybe she really loves me enough to forgive me a second time." Alexis took the flowers, sniffed the bouquet, and threw it in the trash. Then you and little Miss Tiny Bopper can discover your love together. You can take her to the last boy band concert and have a Coke together. Alexis took a deep breath. You make me sick. Alexis jumped into a taxi and asked the taxi driver to drive 2 blocks to the garage where her car was parked, giving the taxi driver a decent tip for a short trip. Alexis drove back to her sister's, changed into her gym clothes, and ran a few kilometers. By the time she got home, her sister and brother-in-law Kyle were at home. Alexis told them about the meeting with the lawyer, the public quarrel with Matt, and that he would be handed the divorce papers on Friday. Her brother-in-law noticed this, interrupting her. Wait a minute. Did Matt meet you at the flower shop? How did he know where to find you? My God, I've never thought about it. Let me see your phone. Kyle pressed a few buttons. Did you know that you have a tracking app on your phone? I didn't install it there. Matt probably did. Probably to make sure you weren't following him when he met his teenage girlfriend. Or maybe to keep track of whether you did to him the same way he did to you. That's the problem with cheaters. If you can't be sure of your loyalty, how can you trust your soulmate? While they were talking, Kyle was busy with Alexis' phone. Here, everything is deleted. Matt was served on Friday. He called Alexis at least every other day. He asked for forgiveness and promised to be faithful until the end of their life together. Alexis did not give up a second time, and 6 months later the divorce was final. But not before Matt's lawyer requested, and the judge ordered 3 sessions of psychological help for the couple. The psychological help sessions were positive for Alexis. She found out that Matt's serial adultery had nothing to do with her. After all, it had more to do with Matt's lack of self-respect than her lack of love for him. His entire manly character was compensation for the bullying he was subjected to as a child, on the part of his brother, schoolmates, and other people. His first high school girlfriend dumped him shortly after they first made love and started dating his former best friend. The poor guy ends up dating, courting, and marrying Alexis, a truly beautiful woman. Beautiful inside and out. He never realizes that he has won the heart of a wonderful, faithful, loving woman, and their breakup is a self-fulfilling prophecy because of his subsequent actions. Matt would still be married to Alexis if he just believed in her. It was a year later. 6 months after her divorce was finalized, Alexis never smoked that first cigarette. One afternoon, Alexis's sister called with an invitation to have dinner on Saturday night. Dress comfortably, but beautifully. I have a friend who I work with at the bank. His name is John, whom you should meet. Is this another setup of yours? This guy is different. You'll like him. He's smart, successful, and not overconfident. It sounds like the male equivalent of outstanding personality. Alexis laughed when she said that, but agreed to be present. The dinner party was a success, and Alexis accepted John's invitation to go to the show and dinner the following weekend. John Farnsworth rang the bell, holding a bouquet of autumn asters in his hand. Alexis opened the door in a beautiful navy dress and 10-centimeter heels. When John entered the house, he met the gaze of Alexis's stunning blue eyes. You look amazing. Alexis took the bouquet in one hand and played with John's lapel with the other. And you look very smart yourself. Let me put this in the water. John was almost embarrassed watching Alexis in that dress as she left for the kitchen. And these legs are outstanding. When John was helping Alexis put on her coat, she decided to get rid of it right now. So she asked, I'm wearing heels. Will that be a problem? John was a little surprised by the question and wondered if he had time to turn in those damn theater tickets if she was trying to cancel their date. Perhaps she regretted accepting his invitation now that she was standing next to him. No, I like to look into your eyes that way. Would it be a problem if you were accompanied by a guy my height? Look, I'm sorry. Last month, I was dating a guy about your height, and he asked me to wear ballet flats. I didn't even think about it until you came to the door. I just didn't want to seem like a bitch. I suck at dating. Ask my sister. She'll tell you. John laughed, though he wondered if that made her even more uncomfortable. It was all too ridiculous. Okay, can we start over? Alexis blushed. Yes, please. Let's go, or we'll be late. John took her hand and led her to his car, holding the door open for her. John headed downtown, looking back at Alexis. Do you have a problem dating a guy my height? Especially with a guy who likes the way your feet look in those heels? Alexis understood why her sister was so eager to set her up with this guy. He was direct and confident, but without arrogance. My ex-husband was 185 centimeters tall and a cheating asshole. How much are you wearing? 180 centimeters? And you seem like a great guy. I'm a great guy, but for 180 centimeters, thanks. John said it as a joke. But it wasn't enough for my last serious relationship. She needed more height. Well, she sounds just as stupid as my ex. Maybe we should introduce them to each other. Only if we castrate them first so they can't produce offspring. There are enough stupid people in the world. John was already beginning to like this woman. At dinner after the show, John ended up telling her about his failed marriage proposal. Alexis reached out and squeezed John's hand. It's terrible, but at least you found out about it before you walked down the aisle. After 3 years of our relationship, I realized that behind all his bravado was a scared little boy who needed constant confirmation of his worth. After his second indiscretion, at least the second one I found out about, it was time to cut my losses. So, here I am. I'm 24 and divorced. I've dated 4 men since the divorce, and I'm so socially awkward that I almost ruined the best date of my life with my stupid comment about my heels. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Now it was John's turn to reach out and take Alexis's hand. It was hard for him to believe that this gorgeous woman with such a kind heart was asking for his forgiveness. Alexis looked across the table and somehow knew this was the man I was going to marry. We were going to have children, and we were going to grow old together. It was the beginning of a great relationship. 7 months later, on a warm spring night, John asked Alexis if she would marry him. Alexis wrapped her arms around John's neck and said, "Yes," before kissing him passionately. 2 months later, a district judge married Alexis North to John Farnsworth in a ceremony on the lawn behind his parents' house. They had children, and since then they have lived happily ever after. My phone rang, and it snapped me out of my reverie. Looking at the phone, I was glad to see that my husband was calling. "Hi, baby. Katie, where are you?" "I'm sitting in Sullivan's across from the park, drinking and dreaming." "Where are you?" "I came home early. I called your office, and they told me that you left after lunch. I decided to come home and surprise you. I thought we could have an early cocktail, then an early dinner, and then maybe go to bed early." "Anthony, are you trying to get into my panties, dog?" This thought occurred to me. Today is your birthday, and I wanted to give you something special. Special, like what you gave me last night and the night before last? No, it's really special. I bought some magic pills that were advertised on late-night television. Anthony said the words with difficulty before bursting into laughter at his own joke. God, I love this man. His sense of humor and the way he always thinks of me first. What it feels like when he hugs me. I think it's time to give him the one thing he's wanted for the past year. He interrupted my train of thought. What do you do besides drink? You know me, hubby. I let my imagination run wild. When are you going to write down any of these stories and let me read them? What? And tell my husband that he married a pervert? Why not? That way I'll know that we're meant for each other. 2 hopelessly in love perverts. Go home and I'll prove it to you. I'll pay my bill. I'm ahead of you by a couple of Negroni. Have a drink and I'll be home in 20 minutes. Order a Thai dinner. We'll strip naked and feed each other pad Thai and spring rolls. Knowing that my husband was waiting for me, I decided to spend money by taking a taxi instead of a bus. While I was waiting for the taxi to arrive, I called my gynecologist's office to make an appointment and remove the spiral. With any luck, Anthony will be a father by this time next year. End.